Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A55 and see if this phone is still worth buying in 2025. Now, the biggest thing I can definitely tell you is that this phone just came out about a year ago, so in a lot of ways this phone is still probably worth buying, but there might be better options out there, there might be better phones out there for the most part as well. So we'll take a look at all these options throughout this whole entire video. First things first though, if you want to pick up this phone or some other phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A55, the front side of this particular phone is actually giving you a pretty large 6.6-inch Super AMOLED display, and this is a fairly good panel for the most part. It's not anything super insane, it's not like the best panel of all time, but it's not really like a terrible panel either. This thing is giving you, 1000 nits of brightness. It is a 120Hz panel, 1080p, and there's not really anything that's like groundbreaking on this phone, like on the front side, but you always have to keep in mind with the Samsung Galaxy A series, these are almost always cheap phones, or cheaper mid-tier phones. So these are going to be phones that start from very budget price tags all the way up to like $500, $599. That's kind of what the main price range is for these types of devices. So keep that in mind. This is not supposed to be competing with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the Pixel 9 Pro XL, or the Galaxy S25 Ultra. These are less than half the price in most cases for these types of phones. Now, on top of that, you are getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom of this phone, which is always nice to have. I love having USB-C, and you're getting that here. You're also getting on the back side, you're getting this standard glass back. So as always, having these types of glass backs are really, really important. You're also getting a triple camera setup as well. So that also is another really nice thing going on here too. So being able to go through and get this triple camera setup with a glass back is still a very, very nice thing to have. So, that in and of itself is another really cool thing. Now, on top of that, you are getting a micro SD card slot inside of this phone as well. So that right there is another really cool thing. Like being able to go through and get a micro SD card slot inside of these phones is something that is awesome. And if I'm about to go through and pick up a device, that is a really nice thing to basically be able to have, right? Like there's not a lot of phones that have micro SD card slots, and this phone actually has it. So that right there is another really, really cool and important thing to kind of keep in mind within this device as well. Now on top of that, this phone still basically maintains a lot of cool things that a lot of phones have nowadays, but it is missing out on a few key things that you might want to have in some of your current phones. Number one, this phone does not have any sort of wireless charging, as far as I can tell, or any reverse wireless charging. Those things are kind of a big downside. Like if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, it would be kind of nice if you were able to buy a phone that were giving you a little bit better capability there. Unfortunately, this device isn't really giving you anything from that side, which is a pretty big downside. On top of that, this device is also lacking out on maybe having a super bright panel. It's not a terrible panel, but a majority of phones nowadays are giving you better panels when it comes down to it. So that right there can also be kind of a downside, but this phone is still giving you 120 Hz. So that is still a nice thing going on here, but for the most part, it really isn't that, it's not like a groundbreaking panel by any means at all. Now, on top of that, when it kind of comes down to the price tag of this phone, right now in the used market on Amazon, you can buy this thing for about $329, which is not a terrible price to pay for a phone like this. But I will definitely tell you, in my personal opinion, it does make a lot of sense to go and maybe look elsewhere for some other devices. There are a lot of devices out there that you can basically buy, and this one, for $329, for the price, I feel like there might be better options out there. I feel like you can buy a Galaxy S23 for not really that much more expensive than this thing. So that might be one other thing you might have to kind of think about as you're going through and buying this type of phone when it comes down to it. So I think from that side too, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, in terms of the camera side of things, this phone, as I mentioned before, is giving you a triple camera setup on the backside. So it's basically giving you a 50 megapixel wide, 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, then a 5 megapixel macro lens. So in a lot of ways, this type of phone and this type of camera, it's not really a terrible camera, and it still looks pretty decent. But there are a few things to keep in mind here, because it is kind of, a little bit of a different type of layout compared to a lot of phones nowadays. Number one, this type of phone and this type of camera, you're basically getting 4K at 30 frames per second on the back and on the front side. So this right there is kind of an interesting thing here for the most part, because this type of phone and this type of camera, it really isn't that great of it's not a bad camera, but it's really not that great either. Considering that you can only film in 4K at 30, that is kind of a downside here. There's a lot of other phones out there that can give you much better capability when it comes down to the recording side, and this phone is fairly somewhat lackluster when it comes down to that. So again, I don't want you to think this phone's camera, like just because it's a triple camera setup, holds up well against the Galaxy S25. That is not the case at all. This phone's camera is definitely showing its age when compared to a majority of the competition. Now, on top of that, some other big things to keep in mind here. With the Samsung Galaxy A55, this phone is still supported with software as of this point. It just came out last year, and you're probably going to get like another 3 years of software updates in front of it. So that right there is kind of a nice thing to basically have. So you're still going to have quite a few years ahead of this particular device when it does kind of come down to, the future ahead of it. So that's always a nice thing to basically have. And I love being able to go through and buy phones that are going to be giving me longer software support. And that's kind of exactly what's going on here too. So from that side, you don't really have that much to worry about there, which again is a really nice thing to kind of think about. Battery life wise though, this phone's battery life was always very decent. You're getting a 5,000 mAh battery inside of this phone, which is massive. Samsung loves their 5,000 mAh batteries, and you're definitely going to be getting that inside of this phone, which that in and of itself is another really nice thing to kind of keep in mind here too. So if you're going to pick up a phone, there's some really nice stuff to kind of keep in mind there as well in terms of the capability behind this type of phone from software and from the battery life standpoint. Performance wise though, this is definitely not one of its best strong suits in my personal opinion. So you're basically going to go through and you're getting you're getting the Exynos 1480 chipset with 6, 8, or 12 gigabytes of RAM. Now, here's the thing with this type of device, right? If you're going to go through and if you're going to pick up a phone, this type of devices, like the Exynos chipset, it is definitely showing its age in a lot of ways. And that's kind of the problem that you're going to be experiencing when you're going to be getting a phone like this, because that type of device is just going to be stuck in the situation where, it's just not necessarily going to be like the best of the best that you can go ahead and find. So for the most part, if you're going to go through and like pick up a phone, you are definitely going to be feeling like this type of device is showing its age just because it's going to go through and just have this type of Exynos chipset, and it's not really like a Snapdragon chipset. So in a lot of ways, if you're looking at this type of phone too, you're definitely going to feel like once again that it's showing its age, and it makes a lot more sense to go and maybe buy a different type of device that's going to be giving you a little bit more better capability when it comes down to it from that side too. So I will definitely tell you, with the Samsung Galaxy A55, this is not a bad phone, right? There's still a lot of capability behind this phone when it comes down to it, but there are way better phones that I would recommend buying over this phone. I mean, definitely the Samsung Galaxy S23 is one of the first ones that I think about. That is a tremendous phone. That one's going to be giving you so much capability, and that's the phone that I look at as definitely being the better option when it comes down to it. I would probably tell you also phones like the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE, the Google Pixel 7 or Google Pixel 8, those are very good phones as well. And you could kind of make the argument that maybe the A55 is better than a Pixel 7, but I would way rather a Pixel 8, like recommend a Pixel 8 to you, than buying something like a Galaxy A55 in my personal opinion. So kind of keep that in mind. I definitely like this phone, but definitely I think the Samsung Galaxy S23 is probably the better one I'd recommend upgrading to. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.